Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Youssef Dunbar. This is Big Discussions 76, Science and Technology. First of all, please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. Well, as you can see, I am back with another guest. This time joining me is Chandra Harvey. Chandra, welcome.
Thank you.
So what's unique about this is both me and Chandra are Johnson C. Smith University Golden Bulls. So we both attended Johnson C. Smith University, and we both majored in the sciences, and we both work in the sciences as well. And one of the things I want to use this channel to do is to increase awareness of the STEMs, and also to better help and better serve young people from our backgrounds. This channel has a general focus, but one of the things I want to do with it is to help pull up individuals like ourselves. So me and Chandra, we came into contact, or I don't know if that's the best way to say that, but we started dialoguing on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to talk about that. But Chandra, welcome. And do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you got to Johnson C. Smith University?
So I'm originally from Willingboro, New Jersey, and I'm a graduate of Cherry Hill High School East in South Jersey, right outside of the Philadelphia region. I transferred to Johnson C. Smith from University of Delaware. So I was an engineering student at University of Delaware, and somewhere along the way, they discovered that I had a learning disability, and my parents stepped in, and my father felt that it was probably in my best interest if I started looking at alternatives. So he gave me a brochure about Johnson C. Smith. And I was mainly attracted to Johnson C. Smith because they had a program called the MBRS program. That stands for Minority Biomedical Research Support. Now, I know that it no longer exists at Johnson C. Smith, but this was a unique program wherein they would take students starting maybe their sophomore, junior year, and they would do research on campus. And I said, this is amazing, because when I spoke to University of Delaware, they told me that they wouldn't even consider me for any type of research opportunities until I was a junior. And I said, that's too late. I had the knowledge and the foresight back then to know that that was too late for me. So even though I didn't do well at University of Delaware, I had a second chance at Johnson C. Smith, and I was going to make sure that I could get into this MBRS program. So that was one of the major reasons why I chose Johnson C. Smith. My father happened to also be Dr. Robert L. Albright's former supervisor for the federal government. So that also influenced the decision for me to attend.
Okay. So your father did have a JCSU connection.
He had it only through the U.S. government.
Okay.
So eventually, I'm not exactly sure how Dr. Albright started off, but I do know at some point in his career, he was working in Philadelphia underneath my father. He was in charge of the programs for minorities, trying to, get into summer programs in different universities. So he was in charge of those programs, and my dad helped to oversee those programs. And from there, that's how the relationship developed. But then somewhere along the way, he ended up becoming president at Johnson C. Smith, and my dad crossed paths with him too. There is also another person, which I'm not going to mention here, but I will just say that her parents were a major influence at Johnson C. Smith, and her parents lived in my parents' development. So their daughter ended up transferring the same time that I did to Johnson C. Smith. Her parents are graduates of Johnson C. Smith. So my parents and her parents were talking to each other, and I think that's how part of it came about too.
Okay, by process of osmosis, or
yes,
there was some sort of synergy there.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so for those viewers who are not familiar with Johnson C. Smith, Johnson C. Smith is a historically Black college in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's on Beatty's Ford Road. I believe Beatty's Ford Road and Trade Street. So it's right near downtown, not far from the Panthers Stadium. And it's a good school. A lot of teacher-student interaction. And yeah, I'm active in our DC alumni chapter. Shout out to the DC alumni chapter. I'm actually the treasurer. So I'm at every meeting every month. Donating some of my time. So when you got to Smith, what did you major in?
I majored in chemistry.
Okay. All right. And what, so was Smith at that time, was it a general chemistry degree, or was it more organic, or?
It was a general chemistry degree at that time.
Okay. Now, what did you go on to do after graduating?
I spent some time going in and out of graduate school, trying to figure out my learning disability and trying to understand different strategies on how to move forward with that, if I should move forward with grad school or not. But eventually I worked my way back into industry because I'm more of a hands-on person, and that's how I best learn, is hands-on. So I went back into industry. So mainly I have done things, or most of the research I've done has been pharmaceutical related. And also environmentally related, and DOD, so Department of Defense. So those are the three areas that I have been involved in most of my career.
Okay. So before we go on, let's go back to Smith for a second, because this may very well help someone, but to have a learning disability and to get through the chemistry program, what were your keys or secrets for doing that?
I had a really awesome teacher. His name is Dr. Godwin Bomaloo.
Dr. Bomaloo.
And he was the one who helped me to get the tutoring that I needed. I was doing very well at first when I first started at Johnson C. Smith, but then as my classes got harder and I started taking harder classes, like I took physics one semester and mixed with calculus 2, and I was taking organic, and it started to resurface itself again. So Dr. Bomaloo found a physics tutor for me, and I went from almost a D average to almost an A within about a month or two. So I was able to at least get through the course with a B average.
Okay.
Thanks to him.
All right. So it was Dr. Bomaloo's mentoring and him taking the time to help you find a tutor.
Yes.
And it was working with the tutor. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Very good. Okay. So you left Smith and then you went into the private sector. And it sounds like you've been in the private sector for most of your career. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Do you enjoy working in the private sector?
I love working in the private sector, but I also realized at some point while I was in the private sector that there is a disconnect between the private sector and also minority kids in general. This started when I was working at Wyeth. It is now known as Pfizer. I was in the Philadelphia region, and there were some kids that were interning at Wyeth, and they told me they were mistaken for glassware washing people.
Oh.
And they knew that it was because of the color of their skin. And I had never come across anything like that until I had this conversation with these kids. And they said, what makes it so bad is that all of us are scheduled to go to medical school. We've already applied to medical school and we've gotten in. And this is how people are now seeing us. And I felt at that point that I needed to do something, or something needed to be done, so that kids coming out of, minority kids especially coming out of college and coming into the private sector, would not feel that they are being targeted or being placed as glassware washing people or something beneath what their degree actually has them doing. So eventually my path took me down to being laid off at some point, which most of us have been at this point in our careers when you're mid-level. And that was a 10-year hiatus for me, and a very interesting lesson to learn. But during that time, I became a teacher. I started working in Baltimore City, and I was working with kids in the grades in 6 through 12 mainly, but mainly the middle school level.
Mm-hmm.
And I started trying to change some of those attitudes. And the way that I was able to change it was through a nonprofit, a 501c3 that I started, called ESTEAAM. ESTEAAM stands for Environmental Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, Athletics, and Mathematics. What ESTEAAM does is it raises the esteem of children through STEM. It gives them an alternative to the arts and to the athletics, so that they can have a better appreciation for STEM, and they can also learn work ethics. They can learn the work ethics behind whatever they want to do in life, whether that they want to become a rapper, or if they want to become an athlete, they can learn the work ethics through STEM.
Okay. So when you say you wanted to change the attitudes, were those just general attitudes or attitudes towards the sciences?
It was general attitudes towards the sciences, because when I would walk into a science classroom in the middle of Baltimore, they'd say, Miss Harvey, we'll need science. We'll need that. That's crazy. I'm going to become a rapper. I'm going to go into the NFL. And it's hard for me to explain to kids the statistics for them getting into the NFL, especially when they believe they see somebody they just see somebody playing football and they think that, hey, this is a way out of their environment. I get that, because I taught in their environment. I may not have lived in the environment, but I still had to go there every day and teach these kids. So I understand what type of environment that they're coming from. I know that money is a big thing. Some of my students were some of the squeegee kids that you see on TV. I actually ran into some of them one day. And that to me brings a whole other reality to my situation. I'm looking at these kids like, this is their way of survival. So I'm looking at this in a different way for them to survive, but using education as the driving force of their survival, and not just quick money, or not something that they can just see on TV and just think like, oh, we can throw a football and we can go into the NFL, because that's not how it happens. That's not reality. So I want to give them an alternative, and a real alternative to, if you don't get into the NFL, let's have a backup plan. I'm not saying for you not to go after your dream, because you should. And I'm not going to be a dream killer to do it, but I want you to understand the reality that this may not happen for you, because only a handful of people will typically get into the NFL.
Yep. Well, I think, well, before I get into what I was going to say, when you say squeegee kid, are those kids out at corners when cars drive by and say,
Yes.
"Hey, I'll clean your window for you"?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that you spoke to a couple of things there, and I think that imaging. I think that for a lot of kids of color, Black kids, those are the images that they predominantly see. Athletes, rappers, entertainers. And it's confounded by the fact that there just aren't a lot of Black scientists. So hence the importance of us being more visible. Because it's hard to aspire to be something that you don't see on a day-to-day basis. And then there's the added layer of, in some neighborhoods, if you're the smart kid, or if you're intellectually curious, or if you speak a certain way, that can you can get ostracized for that and made fun of, and yeah, you can be alienated for that. So, okay, that's very, very interesting. So, okay, that's very cool that you started that nonprofit. Give us the name one more time. It's ESTEAAM.
It's called ESTEAAM, and it's spelled ESTEAAM. So it has two A's, which we're emphasizing the arts and athletics.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on, and I'm going to leave the information for Chandra's for ESTEAAM, her nonprofit, in the description box below, so people can go to it and contact Chandra if you want to. So, staying on that same vein of helping out students of color, let's take it back to JCSU. So, the way you and I actually met up or linked up on LinkedIn was because, well, you can tell us.
Well, I'm currently a chemist, but because of COVID-19, I am now a recruiter for the company I work for. So we were in the process of hiring for a Lab Tech 1 position, which I started contacting all the HBCUs that I know of and said, hey, please send some of your students my way, because I think this could be a really great start for their career. And especially this is a DoD, Department of Defense position, so they'll have a chance to get a clearance, and it can propel them, to work for the federal government. So there was a young man that I saw on Facebook that had just graduated from Johnson C. Smith with a chemistry degree, I believe. And I reached out and said, hey, if you know this kid, can you please have him to get in contact with me? I might have a job for him. So he reached back out to me, and we chatted a bit, and he sent me his resume, and we started going through his resume. So that's how it kind of got started. But in the midst of me looking through his resume, I found out that he had not done any internships. And I chatted with the young man, and he said, no, I haven't done any internships. We only had this program, but that program was only to work on our senior thesis, not any type of internships. In which I was kind of like, well, what happened to the MBRS program? So I started researching online, as I would do, because that's what scientists do. And I found out that they no longer have the MBRS program, but that's how I came across Anwar. because I saw a quote that he had that was on their website, and it said, I must get in contact with this guy. And his name sounded familiar to me, so I kind of knew that he was probably there around the same time, and so that's how we were able to meet.
Okay. So I think what you described it speaks to something I've set out to do. It's why I started my blogging platform, and it's why I started this YouTube channel, which is, I think that, now, I don't know what mechanisms our alma mater has in place right now for this, but I think that something needs to be set up, especially with the technology that we have today, where we as alumni who are out in the work world right now, something needs to be set up where we can reach back and touch the students early, or where they can reach out and touch us and ask us questions. I've written numerous blog posts about what it was like to get my PhD. I plan to write more. And there were a lot of challenges, even as a straight A biology major coming out of JCSU. There were a lot of challenges when I went to the University of Michigan. And I really feel like someone was praying for me when I got to Michigan, because there were numerous opportunities for me to wash out of the system. And so I don't know, I'm going to talk for a little bit here. I don't know what your experience was like in terms of your cohort in your group at Smith. But I met up with someone, I went to homecoming about 2 years ago, and a friend of mine, we sat down, and she said, had some tea or something. She said, Anwar, you're the only one from our group who has gone on, to actually pursue a career in science, and who's still in those fields. And when I thought back to it, I remember specifically that there was a group who was going to be successful. They were on the ball. They were going to go to med school, and they did. And then there was another group who wanted to go to med school, but didn't quite understand what it took to get into medical school. And in some instances, resisted instruction and resisted the coaching and the mentoring. And it, for example, and I'm going to give it back to you in a second. One of the most basic attributes a scientist needs to have, whether it's in the government, like I'm in now, or in the private sector, or in academia, is curiosity. And I remember our professors at Smith really hammered us about asking questions and reading about science and talking amongst each other about science. And we just didn't do it. And there was one day, I think it was during someone's senior paper presentation, one of the Thompsons looked at us, turned around, looked at us and said, hey, you guys don't have any questions? And so I raised my hand and asked a question, and one of my classmates literally sucked her teeth at me. And I'm saying all this to say that when I got to Michigan, asking questions, that was like basic. And so for the first year or so, I felt like I was out of my league, because I didn't know how to just be curious. And if it's a dumb question, it was a dumb question. If it was a smart question, it was a smart question. I didn't know how to be okay with being wrong. And I even had to, even right now in the federal government, I had to kind of work through that and get used to talking the science and just asking questions and not being afraid to look stupid and look wrong. So I'm saying that to say that these are things that we as the alumni, I think, need to be saying to the students earlier, so that they know, because when they're hearing it from the professors, it's the professors telling it to them. And some of them are probably going to be like, yeah, whatever. But if we're saying it, I think that's different. So.
I can absolutely agree on that, because the one thing about our professors, with the exception of Dr. Bomalu, none of them have worked in industry. They have all been professors, and they all preach going to graduate school. The major problem that I had with Johnson C. Smith in that aspect is that they never presented any alternatives outside of graduate school. And that could have saved me a lot of time. It saves people a lot of money, because a lot of these students are coming out of school not realizing that if they did an internship with the federal government, if they did an internship in private industry, most of these places will help to pay for your degree, or at least give you a reimbursement.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know that that exists. And that really comes down to alumni. And it also comes down to alumni speaking to these professors so that we can get to these students. I've had conversations with the chemistry department at Johnson C. Smith about this. And unfortunately, it still falls on deaf ears. So I think if we're going to do something, we need to work in relationship with the Department of Chemistry and Biology and the university, and somehow make it mandatory where these kids will have to talk to us, where they will have to have us as mentors from their freshman year on through, where they at least connect with us at some point, even if it's just a 1-credit course.
Right.
Just so that they have access to us. And somebody on the university end will have to hold these kids accountable.
Yeah. I think it's a waste of time, and it's unfortunate for students to have to reinvent the wheel over and over and over again when the knowledge and the expertise exists within the alumni network. So I think with the technology we have today, I mean, there's no reason why we can't do a quarterly Facebook Live or a quarterly Zoom meeting with 5 or 6 of us where they can ask us questions. And I started, for those watching this, I did start, there's a JCSU STEM alumni Facebook page, and there's a JCSU STEM alumni Facebook group. Now, Dr. Champion did tell me a lot of today's students are not on Facebook. So I did start a JCSU STEM alumni Instagram. I haven't mastered Instagram yet, but I'm trying to put some of those pieces in place so that we can do this. I think certainly me and you linking up, I think this is another step. We have to pull some more folks in. But I think that with the technology today, there's no reason why we can't do something like that. So if anyone at the university is watching this, please do what you can to help put something like this together, and we will do our part. But before we go on, because we're almost, I think I have one more question. For general knowledge, can you describe what a Lab Tech 1 does? Was that in the private sector or in the government?
This is for a government position.
Okay.
So a Lab Tech 1 would be somebody who's pretty much just fresh out of college, maybe 0 to up to 3 years experience in the lab. And we say 0 because they could have maybe 6 months experience working as an intern, or 3 months experience working as an intern, throughout the summers. And it could be any type of lab equipment. This particular position was for COVID-19. So we were trying to get, and I felt like COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting African Americans. So I wanted to make sure that we can stop all the misinformation going on if we pull kids from that just recently graduated from HBCUs and have them testing so that they can tell their friends and family, this is true, this is what's going on, and help to educate our community. So that was my purpose in, trying to recruit African Americans, especially from the HBCUs, for this particular position.
Yeah. Well, on top of that, I mean, in addition to that, because that's important, but while we have this unfortunate pandemic and this new virus, it's going to create new research areas. It's going to create potentially new drugs, new medications, and whoever gets in now is going to be riding that wave going forward.
Exactly. They're going to be able to benefit from this and be on the front lines of what's going on in the science world. So, and I also looked at that too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And, for any students watching this, it's, if you haven't done any internships, and as you said, the MBRS program has been discontinued, it's one thing to learn about science in the classroom, but then to actually go and do it and put your hands on it every day, and to have to plan experiments and generate data and be consistent, and to take a project and make it yours and to take it seriously, that's a completely different thing. And that's one of the major learning points I had to learn during my doctoral research, because I did the McNair program twice at UNC Charlotte, and I did an EPA fellowship one summer, but to actually live it every day and to do it and it's just different than just learning about it in class every day. I mean, which is part of the journey, but yeah, there's no substitute for that, actually doing it and putting your hands on it every day. Okay. Well, I think we've covered most everything, Chandra. Let's see. So we've told the audience what your nonprofit is. Do you have a website for it?
Yes, it's ESTEAM. It's ESTEAAM.org.
Okay. And that link will be in the description box below. Are you on any forms of social media yourself, or just LinkedIn or anything else?
I am personally on Facebook, so people can reach out to me on Facebook, and I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn now. So you can shoot me a message through LinkedIn. It's usually on. So I know the clink, and I come right running trying to see if I have a candidate. So I would say those are definitely my best forms.
Okay. So Chandra, before we go, a bit of free advice for the students in terms of resumes, because you and I talked about this before we started the interviews. What are some basics that students need to know about putting together resumes to submit to companies or graduate schools? Or
So the number one thing is to read through the job description and tailor your resume to the job description. Whatever that job says, you need to tailor everything to the job description. So even if that means that you may not have done something on that job description, take something from your volunteer experience and you can turn it into something that matches, something similar to whatever the job says. The second big thing is to make sure that you do not refer to yourself or have anything identifying you as a minority. No minority programs, no fraternities, sororities, any type of activities, extracurricular activities that are in the secular area, do not put those down, because it identifies you as a minority, and that could disqualify you. So it is important that you only include things like, for example, in chemistry, we have the American Chemical Society. So if you're a member of the American Chemical Society, put that down. We don't want to say that you are a member of, let's say, Novachet or NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, because then that starts to separate yourself. So I would say stay away from that. And another big thing is that if you've worked in any place outside of whatever that job description says, don't put that in your resume, because it's going to become irrelevant, and then people may disqualify you for those positions.
Okay.
So I would say those are like the three major things.
Okay. So Chandra, so when going back to organizations like Novachet and NSBE, does that mean that because recruiters can see that they're minorities, they'll pull those people out, or what does that mean?
It is a real possibility that because then people will really know that you're a minority, and if it depends upon who the recruiter is. So if that recruiter knows that, oh, this is a minority, association, then, they can do that. They could pull you out. But really, we don't want to try to self-identify. And that just becomes very important in the private sector. We want to make sure that in the private sector, or even in the government sector, that you are being judged, not, well, I hate to say it, but you're being judged by the content of your character. And you belong to majority organizations that's not going to be looked upon, or, in terms of whether this is a minority group or not.
Okay.
So that's mainly the reason why.
Okay. Well, going back to your point about character, I would tell any students seeing this, make sure you build strong relationships with senior scientists or mentors, and make sure you maintain those relationships and don't burn any bridges, because those people will be able to speak about you and speak about, hopefully, your good work. So the character piece that Chandra just discussed is very, very important. All right. Well, Chandra, unless you have anything else to say, that's all I've got.
Okay. No, I think that's about it that I can think of right now. I would just say to the students, just try to see if you can network as much as possible. And you need to expand your network outside of the university. There's a bigger world outside of the university. Your professors on the campus can only take you but so far. So please try to see if you can get involved in groups like we were just discussing, like NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, Novachet, National Organization of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers. So try it, or even ACS, American Chemical Society.
That's a big one.
So that is a huge one, because if you can get involved in any of those organizations, you're expanding your network. And not only that, you also can really have a real opportunity to land some great internships in the government and also in private sector.
Mhm.
And that's a big thing for people, because what people don't understand is, in order for you to even get into the private sector, this was true when I first came out of college, and now it is really true. If you do not know certain things, like there are certain things called GLP, good laboratory practices, CGMP, good manufacturing practices. If you don't understand how to actually document those, any type of findings in that format, you may not get hired for positions. And I realize that this is something they don't teach in universities, because people aren't certified in these areas in universities. But that's why it becomes even more important for you to rely on internships to learn how to document.
Yeah.
And as they say in the federal government, if you didn't write it, it didn't happen.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Um, how do they say? I plead the fifth. Yeah. So these things have to eventually start to make it into your vocabulary. And another tidbit before we go is that I didn't learn this until I got into graduate school at the University of Michigan, that every discipline has its own society. So, for example, pharmacology, there's ISSX, the International Society for the Study of Xenobiotics, and there's ASPET. There's, for toxicology, there's the Society of Toxicology, and as you just mentioned, there's ACS. Well, all those people, they're not only getting together to talk about their latest research, but there are recruiters there are employers there, there's networking being done. So if you can get to a meeting there, I cannot emphasize the importance of going to a meeting and then just showing your face, shaking hands, and just getting in the conversation. That's very, very important. Chandra, one more. I know I keep extending this. You said something about things starting as early as 8th grade before we started the interview. Can you talk just briefly about that? How this thing is starting a lot earlier now?
Yes. So one of the things that I was working for a program called Project BioEyes, and it's a program that's under Johns Hopkins, where we bring in zebrafish, and kids are able to raise zebrafish in classrooms. One of the studies that they have been working on at Hopkins is trying to see when kids are actually starting to lose interest in science. And the changeover point is that 5th to 6th grade. Once they start hitting high school, they start not to care about science anymore. But what happens is in high school is that if you are not prepared to take certain classes by the time you hit the 8th grade, and you're not in those honors classes for science or math, or you're not graduating with either a Calc 1 or at least a pre-calculus by the time you finish high school, when you get into college, you're not going to be able to really succeed in the sciences unless if you've had those prerequisites. If you look at any of those colleges, like a University of Michigan, University of Delaware, or Drexel University, they already require you to have certain coursework. And if you don't have those courses, you're not going to be able to declare your major. Wow. When you get into college. So that's why it becomes important in the 6th through the 8th grade that you get your best preparation then. And you need to declare yourself as a STEM major between the 6th through the 8th grade. Starting in 6th grade is best. Wow. So then we can prepare you to go into high school, because if you can take all honors classes in high school, and I promise you, no matter what university you go to, whether you go to Harvard, whether you go to a small historically Black college like Johnson C. Smith, you will be smooth sailing and you won't have any issues with your classes.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we will we'll end there.
Okay.
So, Chandra, thank you for coming on and sharing some of your knowledge and expertise. Hopefully, this will be the first of many discussions between us, and hopefully at some point we can bring in some of the other STEM alumni from the Smith Network and do something even bigger. I'm going to leave your contact info in the description box below. Everyone, thank you for watching. Please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. And as always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Take care, and we will talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.